It's Ben from the Urbstead, and today we're back with part 2 of our 2-part series, answering some questions about how to become a gardener for the first time. You heard last time on some of the questions like how many plants should I plant for the first time, and how to combat wildlife and pests. Today we're going to be answering a couple more questions, so stick around and find out what those questions are, and listen for the answers. How important is soil quality? My answer, personally, is that it is only the most important in terms of gardening and plants and growth and how they affect each other, how soil affects plants and vice versa. I would say soil is the number one concern in the gardener's toolbox, if you will. Now, soil is the medium through which all nutrients go to the plant. Of course, if you're doing aquaponics or hydroponics, that's not a part of the equation. But here we're talking about gardening. So, typical gardening in the soil, in the dirt, where you are producing a product based on the nutrients found in your soil. Not only found in your soil, but found in your soil in a way that the plants can accept it. Now, what we're doing here is we're trying to do everything without chemical additive like pure fertilizers that is already in the state in which it needs to be for plants to accept it. So we're trying to do things a little more holistically, and that takes time. But it also adds more permanence to the soil year after year. So, soil health, huge. We've already talked about in other videos that there is a whole ecosystem of life in the soil, and you directly affect that ecosystem with every decision you make. Now, it sounds like if your soil's not perfect, you're not going to get anything to grow, and that's not true. Our first year of growing, all we did to make our garden beds is we took the sod and we flipped it over. Now, that dirt has been front yard lawn for years, and our plants kind of showed that that was the case in the first year because the plants didn't get big, healthy, their root systems weren't that prolific, and we believe that that was heavily influenced by the lack of microorganisms or the lack of garden-specific bugs in the soil. So our answer to that is, no matter what you do, if you are doing year after year planting into your garden, and if you're doing it in a way where you're trying to add carbon continuously, you will always continue to improve your soil. Organic matter is a phrase that I throw around a lot. And organic matter is basically exactly that. All of the living matter stuffs, yard stuffs, plant stuffs, leaves, grass clippings, mulch, woody material, all of that getting into the ground, decomposing, composting, all of that material begins to act like a sponge for moisture and a sponge for organisms. So these organisms need to feed off of this carbon material, and all of the water that comes down from the sky in rain or that comes to your garden through the water hose, it's either going to seep in and permeate the ground down, or it's going to slide off. The higher the amount of organic matter in your soil, the higher likelihood that you will get deeper penetration of that water, thus allowing you for more long-term moisturizing of that dirt, which also then allows it to be looser. Roots can dig down deeper and reach out farther to gather more nutrients, thus making the plant above the ground more healthy, more tasty, more full of the good things that you want from vegetables, and better at fighting off pests. Healthy plants suffer disease less. Weird. How do I decide where to put the garden? Now, this again is going to be specific to you, so I can't give you a one answer fits all, except that there are some guidelines. Sun, natural elements like pests or wind or rain exposure, and even position in terms of the compass rose. So it's typically said that you would like to have your garden bed oriented north to south. And the reason for this is sun rises in the east and goes to the west. That way both of the sides of your garden bed get full sun. If there's some taller plants on one side or the other, it will cast shade. So you want to get that full effect by getting sun on both sides. This is not crucial or critical to any extent because we have seen success with both directions. So take that for what you will. You also want a place that is fully sunny, specifically if you're doing plants that like full sun. Don't put it in the shade of a tree or in the shade of your house. You also want to keep it in an area that may be less prone to pests. So maybe not put it right next to the woods. One, for the sun reason, and two, because the animals could just creep right out and eat it and go back in. Most animals are skittish of open areas. Finally, the garden bed is going to be exposed to the elements. So if you like to grow tall plants or anything like that, an area that you know gets high wind maybe is not the best place to put it. If there's a windbreak or a low hill right before it, that might be a better place for you. Also, you want a place where it's going to get rain. Maybe don't put it in the low spot to where it's going to swamp every time it rains. But also, some water retention is going to be to your benefit. So you can design your garden bed in a way that it won't get swamped, but it'll get plenty of water. It won't get blown over by wind, but it will have enough exposure to the elements that these plants are growing healthy and strong. How do I start seeds at home? This is a situation where you can go simple all the way up to the most complex. We try to keep it pretty simple and try to address this issue in a way that makes it as easy as possible for us. We went out and bought some really sturdy seed starting trays, as you can see here, as well as pods that are very reusable. You can see this. This is going to be just as easy to pull all of these things out of, rinse under a sink or a spray or a hose, and set it aside for the year once these are done being used. This plastic is also a lot thicker than typical trays that you would buy at a store, and that really helps because they're going to get beat up. They're going to get used, and oftentimes with the thin, flimsy plastic, you're going to shred those things up and it's just going to be trash. You start with your seeds, you go get a seed starting mix or create your own. You fill up these pods, you place the seeds at a depth that is typically given to you on the seed packet itself. And one day I'll get there where I can put one seed in each and just trust it, but I typically put two. And what I'll do is, for most plants, I pluck the weakest of the two and allow the other one to take the full space. And then I'm looking for things like roots on the bottom. Depending on the type of plant, if I see roots coming out the bottom and let it grow a little bit beyond that, I'm going to be looking to up pot them. Perhaps into something that looks like this. Now, this is a lot more room, and these plants can grow to a larger size than in these other smaller pods. And what this will probably be the last thing that they live in until I'm ready to plant them into the ground. So you have your seed starting mix, you have your seeds, and finally you're going to need a source of light. You can get complicated on this, and you can try and go into that full spectrum or the red and blue spectrum light and what's the best there. Or you can do what we did, which was on Amazon. We found some strip lighting, LED lighting, that is easy to install, and we strapped it to a wire frame shelf from a department store, and that was our seed starting area. We have one heat mat just in case there's plants that require more heat, like peppers and tomatoes, and then we just kind of make sure we spray it down as often as it needs. We don't want the soil to dry out, especially while it's still in the seed or in the very early stages. You do not want to dehydrate your seedlings at all. So we spray gently over the top, and then as the plants grow up, we start to bottom water so that the soil in the cell gets wicked up into and up to the roots. So, nice and easy. How do I plant store-bought seedlings? Now, depending on the store you got it from, typically a greenhouse, those plants are likely going to already be used to direct sunlight. Now, if it's not direct sunlight raised or anything like that, you will need to temper the plants so they don't get a sunburn by taking them into and out of the sun for a few days before they're ready to be planted in the ground. And this is just going to help them be able to start off at a good speed. If you put them out right away, that will stunt their growth and slow the progress to getting fully acclimated to the spot that they're in. So, you go to the greenhouse, you buy a tray of plants, you come home, and it's as easy as picking a spot in your garden and typically just going right ahead to plant. Once they're in the ground, you want to press them firmly in so that they're nice and there's not a whole bunch of air pockets around it. You also want to water them in pretty religiously. This is just going to help them have the best chance to get those roots out from the trays that they started in and into the surrounding soil. One bonus point here at the end is what you can do with perennials in your garden. So the perennials that I have in mind specifically here are asparagus, berry bushes, and some herbs. These are things that take a little bit more of a long-term vision to accomplish, especially asparagus, which takes 3 years from its infancy to being able to harvest, because you're trying to build up that root crown to be a larger, healthier base for future growth. But asparagus, berry bushes, and some herbs, these things can give you a low-cost return for up to 10 or 12 years from the time that you start them. Of course, berry bushes, you know, most are pretty prolific in growing or spreading, like raspberries, blackberries, and black raspberries. Blueberries are wonderful bushes that will just continue to bush out, and produce many, many, many more berries year after year. Now, another note on perennials is location. What if you don't want to try and commit right away to a location for a certain plant? A lot of perennials are very forgiving. So say asparagus, you can dig up the whole area around it and take the crown out and replant it, and it's not like you're starting over on that 3-year cycle. You have now moved and basically planted a very healthy, mature crown. Same with berry bushes. If you move and plant them in the fall, that's going to be even better, because over the winter they'll have time to get their roots back out, established into their new home location. Plant perennials. They will be a big game changer in the permanence of your garden. Thank you for coming by the Urbstead today for part 2 of our 2-part series, answering some questions about how to start your new gardening journey. I hope that these answers have been able to enlighten you in some areas that you might have had some questions. If there are other areas that you have questions in that you just have not been able to find the answers, put the questions down below in the comments. I'll collect a few together, and maybe we'll just do another one of these videos where I can answer a few more questions about beginner gardening. It hasn't been very long since we started our journey, and a big part of our journey so far has been looking up question after question after question. That is one way that we learn. So let us return the favor to you by teaching and sharing the information that we have learned along the way. Thank you for stopping by. Again, leave a like if you enjoyed the content, subscribe if you haven't already, share this with a friend if you know someone that's starting their own gardening journey. And as always,